Hello, everybody. Welcome back to an episode of Red Dead Redemption Character Analysis. We're back here. It's been a little while since we did the last one, but I know it was a huge hit. We did Lenny, which is fan favorite around the Red Dead series. I know I mentioned in that video, um, but it was a good hit. You know, got a good amount of views, and usually the past few character analysis I've gotten a good amount of views and likes. So I appreciate you guys supporting this series. It's always had some good videos coming out. So I appreciate you guys showing the support for the character analysis series. Particularly, Red Dead has had more success, just views wise and stuff. It's got, it's gotten more engagement and stuff like that. So it works out. It works out pretty good. And yeah, we're going to be continuing on with that today with one of the more important Red Dead characters, at least towards the end of the story. In Red Dead 2, it's kind of funny you mentioned Lenny was a fan favorite in the for the last character analysis. Kind of switching from a fan favorite to a person everybody hates. Of course, that's Micah Bell. Everybody hates him for what he did in the story. All Red Dead fans can agree he's the most hated character, probably in all of Red Dead. Between the first game and the second game, he's probably the most hated character. So I think we could all agree on that. And just in terms of what he did to, of course, Arthur and a few other people in the story that kind of he wronged him in many ways. And it's one of the key factors for contributing to the gang's downfall, amongst other things, of course. But he was one of the, if I had to say, he's one of the key factors in the gang's downfall. So, in the end. So we're going to be getting into it, of course. Micah Bell, he, as much as I don't want to cover him, again, saying how much he's hated by just me personally and also other people in the Red Dead kind of fan base. As much as I didn't really want to cover him, I hate kind of seeing it going over what he did. He's a very important character, and I say I cover all important characters to the story. So he is a very important character to the story, however, an antagonist. So yeah, he's definitely important to the story in terms of what he did. So we're going to be getting into it. Of course, our info coming from the Red Dead Wiki, great site, perfect things on there. Describes everything nice and organized. So can't have enough praise for those guys over there. So kind of starting off here, Micah Bell the third. I didn't even know he's the third. That's pretty interesting. Just referred to as Micah Bell. Is a central character and the main antagonist of Red Dead Redemption 2. He's also mentioned in Red Dead Online. Pretty sure that's when you go and see his friend. I think it was Joe. I think it's Joe. You could pick up a mission from Joe in Red Dead Online, and I think he mentions Micah in a cutscene. I think that's what they're referring to there. So going into his history, Micah Bell III was born circa 1860 to Micah Bell Jr., a ruthless petty outlaw. When Micah was 17 in 1877, he and his father were on the run for a brutal double homicide of Roscoe and Jean Briggs, who were hung from their rafters with their throats slit. It could be assumed that his father's partner in crime throughout his upbringing, although evidence suggests that he also ran with his brother Amos. For a time, Micah would later have a falling out with Amos, who by 1899 is repentant of his actions and lives in California with his wife and daughters, whilst making it clear to Micah that he wants no contact with them, threatening to kill him if he's anywhere near himself and his family. Micah became acquainted with the two outlaws named Cleet and Joe at some point during his criminal career. He also mentioned being involved in a failed bank robbery down south with a man named Norman. Around December of 1898, Micah met Dutch Vanderlyn at a bar in town in the Grizzlies named Crenshaw Hills. Dutch had tried to sell gold that his gang had recently stolen, but the deal went sour, leading to an altercation in which Micah stepped in and saved Dutch's life. As a result, Micah was accepted into the Vanderlyn gang. Despite being an experienced outlaw who is respected for his skill in combat, Micah was generally disliked in the gang. In particular, Arthur, John, and Hosea saw him as argumentative, reckless, and hothead, with Dutch alone taking a liking to him. Kind of sets up for the end there. For 5 months, Micah set his sights on a ferry in Blackwater as a potential robbery, although Arthur and Hosea had their own lead, which was mentioned multiple times throughout the story. Dutch instead chose Micah's option, which promised a big reward, but was also riskier. The heist turned out to be a complete disaster, however, and a huge gun battle with the Pinkertons ensued. Due to this, the gang was forced to flee and eventually managed to lose the law by entering a blizzard on the snowy mountains of Ambrino. Fortunately, both Jenny Kirk and Davy Callender were fatally injured, and Matt Callender was captured and killed by Pinkertons. That's Micah's brief history. Going into the events of Red Dead Redemption 2 in the Coulter chapter, along with John Marston, Micah was sent to scout ahead while the rest of the gang looked for some shelter. After settling at an abandoned mining town named Coulter, Dutch and Arthur ride out to try and find any sign of Micah or John. After a short ride north, they come across Micah, who's seen riding with a lantern. He says that he found a homestead up north that appears to be throwing a party. The three eventually come across the homestead where Micah and Arthur take cover while Dutch tries to persuade the occupants to help them. Whilst in cover, Micah discovers the dead body in the wagon and alerts Arthur before a shootout occurs when the house's inhabitants are revealed to be O'Driscolls, who attempted to kill them. After killing the enemy gang members, they loot the home. Micah finds a distressed woman in the cellar, which turns out to be Sadie, of course, and begins harassing her. Dutch and Arthur enter to try and defuse the situation, but believing her to be an O'Driscoll, Micah flips the table. This is the stupidest part. Like I'm just gonna say now, this is the stupidest thing Micah could have ever done in the whole story, I think. He flips the table, knocking down the lantern and setting the house ablaze, the nice warm house that they could have moved some of the gang members into that was mentioned. The stupidest thing he did. The trio soon realize that she is not an enemy, of course, so they grab her, leave the burning ranch, and after returning to camp, Micah finds out that he's bunked with Bill Williamson, Javier Escuela, and Lenny Summers, prompting him to make racist remarks about his bunkmates. Yeah, that's insinuated. Mike also is ordered to go back to the homestead and bury Jake Adler, though he most likely didn't since there is no evidence of any grave nearby. Micah later gets into an argument with Bill and punches him in the face, although Bill is restrained by Lenny, Arthur, and Javier before a fight can break out. Dutchin comes in, reprimands the two before telling them that they're going to launch an assault against an O'Driscoll camp, which Micah is involved in, of course. At the end, Micah searches the camp and finds information about a train which the O'Driscolls are planning to rob and gives the map to Dutch. Dutch later decides to rob this Cornwall train, and Micah is part of the crew involved with the robbery. After the guards are eliminated, he searches the train for loot with Arthur and Lenny. Moving on to the Horseshoe Overlook chapter, when the gang's wagon train transfers from Coulter to Horseshoe Overlook, Dutch sends Micah scouting together with Lenny. They briefly return to the gang's camp. Micah can be met at Horseshoe Campfire during the early stages of the chapter. Before they are sent out scouting once again by Susan Grimshaw, two of them end up in the area of Strawberry. Bell decides to seek a former criminal associate of his, Norman, who lives in Strawberry. After playing some five-finger fillet with Skinny and the other men, Micah gets into a drunken fight which accumulates in him killing two men, most likely members of the O'Driscoll gang, landing him in the local jail where he shares a cell with another member of the O'Driscoll gang. Lenny, who manages to escape from Strawberry, rushes the gang's new camp and notifies Dutch and Arthur about Micah's arrest. Ordered to do so by Dutch, Arthur reluctantly tries to revives his Strawberry, and rescues his fellow gang member. After being freed, Micah immediately shoots his O'Driscoll cellmate in the head, and the pair clear off for the guards in the immediate area. Arthur insists that they should leave, but Micah instead fights his way through the town to get his prized revolvers back, searching for Norman, who has taken possession of his guns after his arrest. Micah soon finds him and kills both him and his wife before retrieving his guns and resuming his escape from the town. The reckless charge leaves many lawmen dead and almost costs both Micah and Arthur their lives. Afterward, Arthur scolds Micah for his carelessness, not wishing to return to Dutch empty-handed after the massacre in Strawberry. Micah remains in Big Valley to work on a robbery. He is later joined by Arthur and asks him to help him rob a stagecoach. After a brief gunfight with a pair of outlaws, they take the stagecoach before a gang of O'Driscolls attempt to steal it from them. Micah and Arthur camp on the side of the river and after a long fight annihilate the enemy gang. Arthur and Micah then take the loot, and now, feeling that that Micah has redeemed himself, Micah returns to the rest of the gang. At some point later, when the gang realizes that they need to relocate, Micah suggests Dewberry Creek as a possible place to go. Arthur and Charles Smith investigate the location, decide that it is a poor choice for the camp, so they eventually decide to settle at Clemens Point instead. Moving on to the Clemens Point chapter, at some point news reaches the gang that the O'Driscolls intend to hold a truce meeting for Dutch and Cole, hence the gameplay you guys are watching right now. Jose believes it to be a trap, and Dutch initially agrees with him. Micah, on the other hand, insists it is worth going and successfully convinces Dutch to attend. Dutch, Micah, and Arthur ride out to meet the O'Driscolls and converse along the way with Micah, reasoning that it's a chance for the gang to have one less enemy to worry about. However, the meeting results in Arthur's capture, and after he is sent to a secluded spot above to be a sniper unaware of this, Dutch and Micah leave unscathed and return to camp. A few weeks later, Arthur meets Micah Bell and Sean McGuire in Rhodes to discuss a potential protection job with Sheriff Lee Gray and his family. However, it turns out to be a trap as the Grays discover that the Vanderlyn gang were responsible for burning their tobacco fields. Sean is killed in the ambush, leaving the other three gang members to fight lawmen and Gray hired guns. Bill is soon captured, leaving Arthur and Micah to work together. After dealing with most of the enemies, Micah and Arthur confront Sheriff Gray and demand the release of Bill. Lee Gray then exits his office with a gun to Bill's head, but is killed by Arthur before his accomplices are gunned down by Micah and Arthur. After the shootout, Arthur angrily blames Sean's death on Micah and Bill's carelessness and asks Bill to give Sean a proper burial. After the Braithwaites abduct Jack, Dutch tells Micah and Kieran Duffy to stay behind and protect the camp, while the rest of the gunmen assault Braithwaite Manor to rescue Jack. Powering on into the Saint Denis chapter, Micah gets a lead on a heavily guarded stagecoach and decides to bring Arthur and Bill along for the robbery, using dynamite to stop the stagecoach before descending upon it. After a short fight with the well-armed guards, the stagecoach loot is taken by three, who divide the spoils. Um, that was that stagecoach mission is an optional mission, by the way. It's kind of like an optional side mission you could do. Very interesting. Gives you some good money, but just so you know, that's a side mission that they're talking about, not a required mission that you do with Micah and Bill. A little bit of a side note, as much as me and everybody else dislikes Micah, I do like this quote. I'm going to actually show it here within the gameplay now. But I do actually like this quote by Micah. It's actually quite interesting, and he mentions it to Arthur in passing, and here it is.
Dutch said you was a big shadow cast by a tiny tree.
I don't even know what that means.
I thought you was a tough boy. Not one of those gentlemen trying to protect his riding clothes.
I just know whenever things get real, you turn yellow, lose your head.
Yellow.
Sure seems that way.
So I guess you won't be riding with me to rob the banking coach comes about this time in the Strawberry. I heard one of the O'Driscoll boys yapping about it while I was inside.
You and me? Do a robbery?
That's what I said, didn't I?
After you.
You know, that whole clip there is just it's just like, that's obviously in one of the earlier moments of the game before Micah really turned that bad, and playing this mission on the gameplay. I just figured I'd mention it. I like the quotes, some of the quotes and stuff he says in there. It's actually pretty cool. So I figured I'd kind of throw that in there as a sweetener to just to mention it. You know, just to throw it in there. Of course, kind of moving on with the Saint Denis chapter after that optional stagecoach robbery. Micah later takes part in the robbery of the Lemoyne National Bank in Saint Denis. After it goes sour, he and some of the other gang members, namely Dutch, Arthur, Bill, and Javier, board a ship destined for the South Pacific. Moving on to Guarma, which, you know, that's debatable. After the vessel sinks during a storm, Micah washes up on the shores of Guarma with everyone besides Arthur. Not long after Arthur finds the others, they are ambushed and captured by Guarman troops. I think that's how you pronounce that. After they manage to escape with the help of Hercule Fontaine, they go and arrest the rebel outpost of La Capilla, where Micah stays for a time. He eventually goes to Cinco Torres along with the rest of the gang. Soon before federal troops descend upon it, after fighting off the enemy attack, Micah reports that Colonel Fusar has positioned artillery batteries on the beach to prevent them from leaving. Micah and the gang then storm the batteries, where he placed the dynamite in order to blow them up. He then takes part in the charge against Agua Dulces, which results in the ship of Captain, of course, kind of messing up. Being rescued, and the five were able to leave safely. Along with the rest of the gang, Micah then sets sail out of the Guarma and returns to the United States, which proves to be them going back to the United States. That was a very important part for Micah, and we'll find out later why. Just kind of leaving that, but, you know, for those of you who know that, knows when he starts talking to the Pinkertons, but we'll get into a little bit more of that later. Beaver Hollow, at some point after arriving back in America, actually we're getting into it now, apparently, per the wiki. Micah secretly became an informant for the Pinkerton National Detective Agency, who later saw the gang's hideout in Lakay. The gang barely survives the assault, managing to push government forces out thanks mainly to the efforts of Arthur, Sadie, and Bill. Following the Pinkerton assault in Lakay, the gang are forced to move their camp to Beaver Hollow. From that point forward, Micah starts having strong influence on Dutch, who has become increasingly dismayed at Arthur's decaying trust in him. Mainly caused by the latter's discovery that he is terminally ill with tuberculosis, Micah becomes more influential, acting as Dutch's new enforcer and right-hand man. Micah makes a plan with Dutch to confront Leviticus Cornwall after his yacht comes into Annesburg. The two bring along Arthur, and the three wait for him at the docks. Micah goes and searches for information relating to Cornwall Company, while Dutch and Arthur confront him. After Dutch kills Cornwall, Micah rendezvous with the two other men, and the three fight their way out of the town. Later on, Micah, Arthur, and Bill meet up outside of Van Horn to make plans for stealing some of Cornwall's dynamite. As part of Dutch's and Micah's plan, after an argument with Arthur, Micah instructs him and Bill to carry out the task themselves, citing that he has some planning to do. Some of this gameplay is actually shown later on, so stay tuned for that. After this has been done, Micah asks Arthur to help John blow up Bacchus Bridge with the stolen dynamite. Micah later shows up to two former criminal associates, Cleet and Joe, who wish to join the gang. Dutch happily accepts them due to him seeing a collapse in loyalty from the rest of the gang. Micah capitalizes on this, creating more conflict between Dutch, John, and Arthur by trying to convince Dutch that the latter two are traitors, while showing superficial loyalty to Dutch. When Eagle Fly shows up at the camp and the majority of the gang join him in the battle against the U.S. Army, Micah stays behind at camp with Cleet and Joe. Micah organizes the robbery of the train carrying Army payroll, and Arthur takes part in it. During the robbery, John gets shot and falls off the train. Dutch says that he will go back for him, but ultimately leaves him to die, lying to the rest of the gang that John was already dead by the time they got to him. After the robbery ends and everyone makes a return to the camp, the gang learn from Tilly that the Pinkertons have kidnapped Abigail. Micah then convinces Dutch not to go after her, saying that the risks are too high. Dutch agrees with him and decides that Abigail is not worth saving. Appalled by this decision, Arthur and Sadie are set to go off and rescue her alone. Of course, they go and rescue Abigail, and this is a big point in which Micah kind of turns the gang and kind of helps the downfall of the gang, kind of how I was mentioned earlier, and it's kind of all downhill from here, as you guys know. So, during the operation to rescue Abigail, Arthur learns from Agent Milton that Micah had betrayed the gang and had been feeding Pinkertons with information ever since his return from Garma. Upon learning this, Arthur returns to camp to confront Micah about it in front of the rest of the gang. Standoff occurs, famous, of course. While Arthur and Micah drawing on each other, Arthur tries to convince Dutch that Micah is the traitor, while Micah tries to get Dutch on his side by denying it and telling him that he could achieve plenty together. Before anything else can happen, John suddenly returns, still wounded, claiming that Dutch and Micah left him to die, and he subsequently joins Arthur's side. Susan also joins Arthur's side and points the shotgun at Micah. Micah kills her while she is distracted with the news of the Pinkertons' arrival. In the end, all of the remaining members of the gang, aside from John and Arthur, side with Micah. Pinkertons, led by Agent Ross, arrive, launching another assault on the gang. Micah and everyone who sided with him then flee the scene. Later, Micah reappears, leading Dutch, Cleet, and Joe to try to pursue Arthur and John on horseback, exclaiming that they are traitors. Due to continuous exchange with fire of the Pinkertons, Micah's posse ultimately loses track of them. Now, this is kind of where things get a little bit important, depending on the ending. The following set of events depend on the player's choice and Arthur's level of honor, so that's pretty important to watch. So follow with me here. If Arthur helps John to escape, Arthur and John run away together and decide to traverse the mountains. Eventually, Arthur tells John to keep going alone when he holds off the Pinkertons. After doing so, Micah tackles him from behind and assaults him. After the two fall off the ledge, they engage in a lengthy fistfight. At the end of the long and grueling, brutal fight, Arthur pistol whips Micah with one of his two revolvers. After being pinned against the wall but loses his grip on it, Arthur then crawls towards this revolver in order to kill Micah, but he is ultimately prevented from doing so by Dutch, who steps on Arthur's hand before he can use the gun. Arthur reiterates that Micah is the rat and that he always did his best for Dutch, and a really sad scene, of course, the ending for Arthur. And that John was the only one who made it, while Micah picks up the other revolver from the ground and begs Dutch to go with him and get the money. In the end, Dutch walks away, abandoning both Micah and Arthur, and this is where the honor kind of differs. It's always kind of interesting to see kind of the differences if you have low honor or high honor. If you have high honor, angered at Dutch's decision to cut all ties with him, Micah furiously departs from the scene, leaving Arthur to die. He does so shortly afterward, after witnessing one final sunrise. And if you have low honor, after Dutch leaves, Micah vengefully approaches Arthur and aims a revolver at his head, bitterly claiming that Arthur is no better than him, then shoots Arthur in the forehead and proudly laughs before spitting on his corpse and walking away. And that's if Arthur helps John. Now, if Arthur goes back for the money, Arthur leaves John to steal the gang's money hidden back. Hidden back in the caves. But he's suddenly attacked by Micah on his way out, who stabs Arthur in the side with his own knife during a brief struggle. Arthur manages to wrestle Micah off of him, and the two engage in another lengthy knife fight instead of a fist fight this time. Now, if you have high honor, eventually Arthur manages to blind Micah in the left eye by slashing it with a knife, to which Micah responds by tackling Arthur to the ground and trying to stab him, but to no avail. Arthur bites Micah's hand and punches him in the face, successfully fending him off. Dutch arrives and breaks it up, but after Arthur reiterates that Micah was a traitor, he decides to abandon both of them. Despite Micah dismissing Arthur's claims as nonsense, Micah also leaves and is seen taking the sack of money which Arthur stole from Dutch's chest, leaving Arthur to succumb to his tuberculosis and the initial stab wound in the rays of the dawning sun. And if you have low honor, instead of slashing Micah's eye, Arthur loses his balance, resulting in Micah tackling him to the ground. Micah manages to stab Arthur in the chest during the struggle, before Dutch arrives to break up the fight. With his dying breaths, Arthur swears that Micah is the traitor and begs Dutch to kill him, but Dutch abandons them both, and after Dutch leaves, Arthur starts to crawl away. But Micah approaches him with a knife and finishes Arthur off by stabbing him in the back. Of course, there's really no good ending in terms for Arthur, of course. And Micah kind of not to say Micah wins, but Micah kind of gets his way either way. Arthur dies, and you're going to fight Micah either way in the end as Arthur. So, but it just kind of depends on how Arthur's final, kind of, if he sees his final sunrise or not. That depends on if you have low honor or high honor, of course. And of course, in the Beecher's Hope chapter or the epilogue, following the Vanderlyn gang's dissolution, I think that's how you say that, or dissolution. Micah went on from his own gang on to form his own gang, taking Cleet and Joe with him. Throughout the years, their notoriety grew with various crimes they committed, including several vicious murders, some of which involved dismemberment. Micah is said to have personally killed 24 men during this time, with a newspaper article remarking that Micah's acts of lawlessness rival that of the Vanderlyn himself. Additionally, Micah found himself in the custody of a sheriff at some point but managed to escape. Sometime later, Micah murdered a family, including a young girl that Cleet tried to save. Micah tried to kill him for his insubordination, but Cleet managed to escape. Micah also reunited with Dutch at some point. Also, they managed to recover the Blackwater money. By 1907, his gang would be based in Mount Hagen. That same year, Sadie catches wind of Micah's activities and ventures out with John and Charles to exact revenge on him. After a trek up the mountain, during which Joe is killed, John confronts Micah and the two exchange fire, ending up in a deadlock. Wounded, Sadie manages to flank Micah from behind, catching him off guard, forcing him to surrender. Before Micah can be killed, Dutch emerges from the cabin. Guns drawn, Micah simultaneously manages to overpower Sadie, holding her hostage, and a Mexican standoff ensues between John, Micah, and Dutch. Dutch initially appears to be on Micah's side, but after an exchange of words, he shoots Micah in the chest, mortally wounding him. In a last-ditch effort, Micah attempts to shoot John and Dutch, but John silently raises his revolver and delivers the killing shot to Micah, having already lost so much blood. Of course, Micah meanders away in an attempt that, everybody thought he lived after that, but of course he dies. Before collapsing to the floor, dead, Dutch looks at Micah's body before silently glaring at John and leaving them to retake the Blackwater money. During the credits, Edgar Ross and Archer Fordham are seen discovering Micah's corpse in the mountains. Further scenes imply that the discovery of this death led to the Bureau of Investigations tracing the murder of Micah back to John, thus leading to the events of Red Dead Redemption. John can later visit his corpse and take one of his revolvers after his body will go missing. And that's the end of Micah, more or less the end of Red Dead 2. And it's kind of interesting to see, all these character analysis, particularly in Red Dead 2, it's really the same story, of course, but it's like, I've read this before. Obviously, I've read it before with Arthur, of course. Not everybody dies at the same time like Arthur, but it's kind of interesting to see, kind of like how it was seen from Micah's point of view or Lenny's point of view, who died earlier in the story. Again, obviously it's the same story. It's just from different point of view and different characters, which is why I think character analysis is so interesting, because you see it from different points of view. So, of course, you see two different characters, or not two different characters, but different characters, different sides, whatever it is it may be, it's all different. So, it's interesting to see kind of, with each character analysis. And of course, I'm going to go over some of the extra stuff here. I don't always go over it, kind of depending on how long the character analysis is. The wiki will have some extra stuff like their personality or appearance and stuff like that. So I'm going to kind of go over Micah's appearance, which I find to be interesting. In 1899, Micah has shoulder length blonde hair along with a thick horseshoe mustache and side whiskers. Micah is slightly portly and often wears a an undone black leather coat, a red or black shirt accompanied by a red vest, a blue neckerchief, beige trousers, and a white hat. He also seen sporting a short-tailed, buttoned-up leather coat during Chapter 2, and promotional artwork. In cold temperatures, he is seen with a long brown leather coat, while in warmer climates, he's seen without a jacket and just his red shirt. Micah is armed with, here's my favorite part, another favorite thing about Micah, and there's not very much, but it's just his guns. Micah is armed with a pair of custom double-action revolvers with "Vengeance is Hereby Mine" engraved in the barrel, sporting dark gray frames and grips that are painted red and black in a skull-like design, which he uses with immense skill, which is kind of cool. I like that he uses his guns. That's pretty interesting. For the bank robbery in Saint Denis, Micah wears a white suit with a black shirt, a red vest, and white tie, while in Guarma he wears the same black shirt, has it undone with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, along with the slightly longer hair now tucked behind his ears, and his mustache and side whiskers becoming a full beard. His face also appears sunburnt, of course, kind of like Arthur's. And by 1907, Micah has lost weight and is slimmer, while also having paler skin, suggesting that he had been in the mountains for a long time. He has shorter hair and seems to have aged fairly considerably, with a more lined face than his hair, having mostly gone gray. His brown leather coat is more worn looking and accompanied his son by black trousers and gray half chaps. Depending on the decisions made in the mission Red Dead Redemption, Micah might have a huge scar on his left eye due to Arthur slashing his eye with a knife if he had high honor and went back for the money. Then, when encountering Micah's corpse in American Venom, his skin is turned pale white and his hat nowhere to be found. Regardless of what decision made in the mission Red Dead Redemption, Micah's body does not have a scar on his left eye. Nor are there any bullet wounds inflicted by John visible, which is kind of interesting. It's just this cold, dead body kind of laying on the ground there, which is basically how he deserved to die, in my opinion. But, and yeah, that's kind of it. That was Micah's character analysis, which I know a lot of people say, I hate Micah. A lot of people hate Micah, but he's just such important to the story and what happened to Arthur, and just the tragic tale of the Vanderlyn gang in general. And again, like I was saying in the beginning, he definitely aided a lot in the downfall of the Vanderlyn gang. So that's he was obviously a very, very important character to report on. So I had to do it to him. So that's the thing. But yeah, pretty much cap off today's episode. Coming back with Red Dead character analysis. I have other plans for other games. So much other games I want to do for character analysis. But I like to make sure I like to go through each game, thoroughly with, each character thoroughly. If there's more than one game in the series, like Red Dead 1 and 2, I want to go through each character thoroughly. So it may take a little bit of a long time for me to get through each character analysis series, or each round of character analysis. I just like to be thorough. So that's really what it comes down to, thoroughly. I want to cover all the characters in the right way and tell the story the right way, and kind of do it in a good manner. So that's the bottom line on it. So, but we'll be back here with more Red Dead character analysis coming up. The next few weeks I'll have another episode come out. I like to space them out pretty evenly as well. So that'll be that's a thing. But it all comes down to consistency and steadiness. But with all that being said, of course, as always, in every character analysis, encourage and just every video, leave feedback on the video. Good or bad, I like to see feedback, I always say. Of course, leave feedback on what you think of Micah. Comment down below what you think of Micah. Do you like him? Do you hate him? I know most of the comments probably would be hating him. But, there's some traits that he does that I do appreciate and I like as a character. Overall, I hate him as a character, but there are some things that I like his revolvers that he wields around. But there's very little things that he does that I like. He's a very interesting character. Again, very important character in the story, especially towards the end after Guarma. So, very interesting character. A lot of things that are interesting about him. And just another in-depth character in Red Dead. So, of course, leave your comments below on what you think of Micah, whatever it is it may be. Start a discussion in the comments. I enjoy to see that kind of stuff, so be sure to do that. Of course, with everything being said, make sure to subscribe for more content. Like the video, Discord, Twitch, Instagram, Twitter, links in the description. Be promoting some more stuff on Twitter, just channel-wise as well. I'll be promoting some stuff, so be tuned for that, and, tune into the Twitter for that. So, be for promotional things on the Twitter, so, be sure to go follow Twitter. A lot of stuff on there, I always say. Got a lot of good stuff coming in general here on the channel. So stay tuned. But for now, with all that being said, I will see you guys in the next video.